I'm Kevin Miller. This is the What Drives You podcast. I've investigated over 270 experts now in the human potential movement. I'm on a quest to find the frontline academics and therapists and researchers who are teaching classes and counseling patients and doing research in labs and leading humanity in realizing our true capacity. I dig in with them to pop the bubbles on our perspectives so we can truly change and grow. So drive and learn with me as we uncover our peak potential and find our true fulfillment. In this episode, from nightclub debauchery to humanitarian devotion, how to find what drives your soul. I bring you a story here of drive. And the fruition I find most people experience, where we start off in life driven by kind of our base desires, and we find them sometimes shallow and meaningless and wonder, is this all life has to offer? Well, I've known of Scott Harrison for many years, but never gotten the chance to dig into his story and his drive myself. Scott is the founder of Charity Water. He's literally put a dent in the global clean water crisis. He's been so successful that not only do celebrities want to hang out with him, but he's become a celebrity himself. Scott's story began by abandoning his faith-based upbringing to spend almost 10 years as a nightclub promoter in New York City. He had great success in driving other people to drink themselves into oblivion and made a lot of money for the nightclubs. He was literally paid to party, and he imbibed to the fullest degree with drugs, alcohol, sex, everything that goes along with it, as you can imagine. Well, as the guy's soul began to dry up, he took a sabbatical to volunteer on a hospital ship as a photojournalist. While in Africa, he witnessed people drinking out of this cesspool of water that he wouldn't have used to clean his glasses with. So he returns to New York a couple years later, and he puts his promotional skills to work to found the nonprofit organization Charity Water. Well, Scott has, again, not only made a global impact for clean water, he's actually today changing how we view and do charity at large. So following is my conversation with Scott to understand what has driven him, what is driving him. You'll hear his story, his infectious drive for his chosen devotion, which is clean water. And it may drive you to want to do the same thing or to find what it is that you feel called to specifically. You can get Scott's full story. It's an incredibly intriguing and enlightening and insightful book. It's called Thirst, a story of redemption, compassion, and a mission to bring clean water to the world. And you can find Charity Water anywhere. Scott, I have known of you for a long time. We were supposed to have you on the show, I think 3 or 4 years ago. I think I have like 3 copies of your book that have been sent to me by different agencies, publishers, whatever. I don't know why the delay, but here we are. And I'm just honored and excited. Thanks for being here.
This will be fun. I'm excited too.
What you have done is significant. And I've got questions across the board on purpose, on charity, on all kinds of things. Though in this cancel culture, I did want to point out for everybody listening, if you got a problem with somebody who would say this, I'm going to put it out on the table. Scott said, I don't know why you would ruin pizza with fruit. So I know it's a big debate. It's funny. I just found that, and that's a debate in my house. I make homemade pizza, and some of it has pineapple, some of it has
pineapple.
So
okay.
That's for my kids. Your story, Scott.
I heard somebody say once too about skydiving. I don't know why I would jump out of a perfectly good plane.
That's especially when you have dependents. And
exactly. It's very funny. So I read in the fine print, and I think it actually would violate every life insurance policy. It's that little thing, where, I would have absolutely gone skydiving before kids, but now, wouldn't think about it.
I was
just with a friend in the Zambezi River. We were in Zambia, Zimbabwe. And, this guy, very, very successful, sold a company for $890 million. He does have kids, but they're older. And he goes bungee jumping in Africa.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there on the platform just saying, I am not going bungee jumping in Africa.
Yeah.
And he was fine. And then I was a little jealous afterwards.
I like adrenaline. I like risk. When the risk of error is death, I pretty much back off these days. Man, you've done a lot. Your story, I feel like, is so well known, but I'm still going to set the stage. And you've told this probably a million times, but you were a successful nightclub promoter for a decade, rocking the, we talk so much on the show about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It comes up so often as we're looking for self-actualization for the most part, but you're rocking that, money, acclaim, and pleasures. Give us that. If there was a catalyst, a specific moment, well, there was, I read your book, but give us that time where you said, oh my gosh, wake up call. And this isn't, you didn't know where you were going, but you just realized, okay, this is not it. Give us that moment.
Yeah. Well, I think, just jumping into nightlife in New York City was really an act of rebellion against the conservative upbringing. I was an only child. My mom was sick growing up. And I think I felt like I lost my childhood. I did not have a fun life as a kid. So in some ways, this was just a reaction to that. And really just exploring the opposite of the rules. It was just an act of rebelliousness. And, the smoking and the drinking and the drugs and the girls and the watches and the cars and the gambling and the porn, like all that just kind of, cascaded one after another, because this is what you do when you are a nightclub promoter in New York City. I mean, this is the lifestyle. This is the community which engages in vice with no end. So I think I just got to the point where, I was like the frog that got boiled. And, one day you wake up and I'm like, wow, I'm actually doing all of these things and I'm really unhealthy. This is not a good way to live. I mean, I'm going to bed at noon, taking Ambien to come down after 5 hours of cocaine and 3 packs of Marlboro Reds. This is not a sustainable life. So there was kind of just that wake up call that, and of course, none of this brings happiness. So as you cascade and as you add one vice onto the previous vices, none of them really do bring that deep sense of happiness or satisfaction or fulfillment or purpose. So I had that moment in South America. It was a New Year's Eve trip. We would always get out of the city every year and take our kind of party somewhere else, to Brazil, or in this case, we took it to Uruguay. And I just remember what was supposed to be a really peaceful, tranquil vacation, we then ruined with more partying of the same. So we get a DJ and, we're in this gorgeous compound, near the ocean with people who are following us to pick up our towels and serving us food. And we've somehow got some sort of party going on and everybody's doing ecstasy and cocaine. And the DJ's playing at 1 the next afternoon and everybody's been up all night. So I just remember, like, I couldn't get away from the party. I couldn't get away from myself. And maybe just the one word would just be unhealth, or maybe depravity would be another good word. So then that began an inward longing, I guess, for trying to find my way back home, and home being the really foundation of faith and morality and selflessness and compassion, generosity that my parents had tried to instill in me, and in fact that they actually lived out. And being a pretty extreme guy, being an Enneagram 8, rather than the pivot or the slow walk home, I just decided to sell everything I own and try to make my life look exactly the opposite. And my idea was, kind of tithe one, and go back to the Christian term of, 10%. What if I gave 10% of time instead of money? And what if I tried to go serve in the poorest country in the world? What would that do to my life? And I somehow actually found that opportunity to go live in a country called Liberia, which had just come out of a 14-year civil war, and join this group of humanitarian Christian doctors who were going into Liberia to offer free medical care.
Can I back up just a second, Scott?
Of course.
I want to come back to because part of your upbringing was a faith-based, a religion, Christianity. Mine was as well. And I left home and just kind of left it. I didn't deny it. I just had other things. You were nightclub and I was a pro cyclist. So I was just doing my thing. and then had my own kind of, epiphany moment. And I did come back to faith. There was still some things I questioned a lot, but there was still some of that. What, like when you said that, you said you came back to some of the faith and the morality.
Yeah, I mean, I started reading the Bible again, and I maybe rediscovered Jesus as a 28-year-old, and he was not religious. He was actually railing against the rules, so many of the rules and the establishment of the day. You know, he was preaching a radical message of selflessness and love and generosity and sacrifice. So I think, the teachings of Jesus were the exact opposite of the way that I was thinking, speaking, and living. Yeah. And that I found that really compelling. I remember, just coming across that verse that I'd probably heard 1,000 times growing up, that true religion is to look after widows and orphans in their distress, and to keep yourself from being polluted by the world. And I just remembered, man, I'm 0 for 2. I mean, I have done nothing in a decade to look after anything that would resemble a widow and orphan. And not only am I personally polluted by the way I'm living my life, I actually pollute others for a living. The more people would get drunk or, do drugs inside one of our clubs, the more money we would make. And so just kind of, what if I did try to serve others? And what if I did try to clean up my own life and unpollute myself? Where would that take me? And that's where this opportunity did. And I think, a lot of people ask, because I went cold turkey. I quit smoking. I never touched coke again. I never gambled again. I never looked at a pornographic image again. I really went like in one night. I went out with a bang. I remember getting drunk and smoking tons of cigarettes, kind of on the last night. But a lot of people ask, how that happened. And for me, what needed to change was the community also needed to change. So I went from a community where that's what we did. We did get wasted every night. We did spray champagne from the DJ booth, And then the new community was a bunch of Christian doctors. Like, it's not cool to smoke on a hospital ship. It's not cool to wake up with a hangover at 5 a.m. when you get scrubbed up for surgery. Yeah. So in some ways, it was much easier to, leave maybe some of those trappings behind, because the new community just had a completely separate, different set of operating principles. I don't know that I could have just quit and been the guy that turned up at a nightclub saying, "Oh, guys, no, I'm good tonight. No, not smoking tonight. Not drinking tonight. No, I'm not going to do any coke tonight. No, I'm good. I don't want to look at that."
Right. I want to pull out what you said a second ago. All those things, the partying, the excess, the pleasures. You said none of it brings happiness. And as you know, man, happiness is that's a huge term. Put happiness on
elusive.
It'll sell. And I look at it, and people have done the studies. People like Arthur Brooks, and they're looking at it and going, okay, when it comes down to it, people say they want happiness, but what we really find is they want security. But then as we look further, what I feel like is, no, what we really want is purpose. And so I'm going to bring someone up. I bet Lynn Twist. We had her on the show.
Soul of Money, right? I think I listened. She wrote The Soul of Money. The
Soul of Money, yeah. But her next book, which again was a year or two ago, whatever we had her on, was Living a Committed Life, where she came into, it was the Hunger Project for her, but she came into it and had some issues in her life. And she says, when I came in and devoted myself to something bigger than me, a cause bigger than me, a purpose bigger than me, she says, it solved so many of the issues in my life overall. Tell me about, I want to hear from the personal side. So you went and you're looking for something that has meaning. How many of the issues that you looked at went away because they just weren't that important next to this big cause?
A lot of it for me was behavior. They were actions. So it was a stop doing these things and then stop wanting to do these things. And again, because the intention of life so dramatically shifted from, getting wasted or getting laid in some club to serving others and pouring out your time and your talent in the service of people who needed help, the context just so dramatically changed, and then the behaviors of the context were very, very different. So I certainly I started to transform by engaging in these new behaviors. I mean, it's kind of like if you went from, overeating and never exercising to eating healthy and exercising every day, like your body changes.
Yeah.
Right. Your mind changes. The actions, I think, then began an inward transformation.
It's important to me that you said you didn't come from this nightlife and this crowd and then decide I'm going to change my behaviors and go back with the same people. You found another crowd.
I think that would have been impossible.
It's the blue zones. I mean, what you're talking about. And I look at, my own life, and to eat clean and to exercise or to fast or whatever. Generally, when I come into the office, it's likely that, 5 people are fasting at the same time. And it's weird culturally, but here it's a blue zone. It's super easy for me. And I grieve for people who try to make a change and then have to go back to the old crowd. It does. It's like you said, it seems like it would have been impossible. You got to find a new crowd. Doesn't mean that I'll ask you, did you totally abandon those people, or did some of them stayed on, but you hung with the new crowd? You did connect still with some of the old folks.
Yeah. I went back into the clubs, to try to start Charity Water and raise some money. And, it was, I don't know, it wasn't that hard. I think not to do drugs. You get enough space from your previous actions, and you can realize that wasn't good for me. Maybe that junk food, it just wasn't good for me. So even though now I'm back in a situation momentarily where everybody's eating the junk food, it didn't bring me happy. You have enough perspective that the healthy food's a lot better. So I think I didn't spend too much time dwelling there. The new environment I was eventually creating for myself, and when we created Charity Water, were like-minded people who were asking how they could be of service. People who were looking for meaning and purpose in their life by helping others.
Okay, I've got a question on motive, but I will ask you again to set the stage. That you end up over here in this other country, and I read the book. You literally witnessed people drinking from this, what we would probably call a cesspool.
Yeah,
and that grabbed you. And at some point, you said, "That's what I want to devote myself to."
Yeah, and I think there's a previous piece. I was with these doctors, and Liberia at that time had one physician for every 50,000 people living in the country.
Smokes.
So if you were sick, you were out of luck. One doctor tried to serve 50,000 people. And what the result of that was our doctors would advertise the coming of our doctors and surgeons, and 5,000 sick people would turn up in response to those advertisements. Now, the problem was, because we were offering kind of intensive surgeries, we could only help 1,500 people. So my third day on this mission, I witnessed us turn away 3,000 sick people without help. And many of these people had actually walked from neighboring countries. They'd walked for more than a month, getting their hopes up in seeing a physician who might be able to cure them. And we just didn't have enough doctors. So I think then when I saw people drink dirty water, which was just as foreign to me as 5,000 sick people standing in a parking lot of a soccer stadium, waiting for the doctors to open the door and start moving them through these stations inside the stadium, seeing people drink water was just as foreign. But I learned very quickly that half of the disease in the country started there. Half of the people were sick because they were drinking unsafe water. So for me, it was a little bit of a jump to the root cause of what we were actually there to do, which was bring people health. But if millions of people are drinking dirty water every day, they can't be healthy. And, that was my eureka moment in year 2 on this mission, where I remember taking some of these pictures to the chief medical officer on the ship, this hospital ship I was on, and saying, no wonder everybody's sick, because this is what they're drinking. They're drinking brown, viscous swamp water filled with bacteria and disease. I think I found it, almost waving my hand. And he, God bless him, said, "Great. Why don't you go work on that then? You found it, go solve it."
Yeah.
And at the time, there were 1 billion people living on the planet without access to clean water. So when I started Charity Water, 1 in 6 humans on planet Earth was drinking dirty water every day. It's kind of an astonishing. Now we're down to 1 in 10, 10% of the planet. But still, like, that's kind of crazy. You listen to this wherever you are, you're in your car, or maybe staring at your refrigerator that has that clean water dispenser, in the front of it. 703 million people today will have a very different experience when it comes with water.
And I'm pissed off if the city water tastes like chlorine. And
exactly.
What
we're putting filters. I mean, I have filters in my, my kids' bath water, right? Trying to take, what's water that's cleaner than, 90% of the world, right? Anyway.
Let me ask about your motive. So here's Scott Harrison, motivated to go forward to a destination, and you're doing it with nightclubs, and you're paying your bills and having fun and doing that. Now you come over here, and within a fairly short period of time, your destination changes and you're going towards something altruistic. Sounds great. I'm curious about your own journey with your own motive. And I've got a bias because I have my own story of going forth to try to serve people, but my motive wasn't totally healthy. I still had my own baggage. And so I went forward and did some things wrong, ultimately burnt myself out. Were your beginnings in there? Did you have some hiccups in figuring out your own motive and pursuit of this destination?
Let me just say, I'm not the most reflective person by makeup. I'm always thinking about the future. Sometimes even hard for me to think about the present, and much harder to think back on the past. What I remember about those early days, now 20 years ago on the ship, was just how much I loved it. I loved every single part of it. I loved the intention of these doctors. I loved the fact that the need was there and we were meeting it. I loved the wholesome living. I loved, going back through sacred texts and trying to kind of, remind myself that, you could actually be a person of faith and not be an idiot, so rereading the C.S. Lewis's and Chestertons of the world, in this little library. I just remember it being, probably the best year of my life.
Wow.
And I found it very easy to change. I found it very easy to not smoke and drink and, want to sleep around. It was very easy to sign up for the clean living, this purposeful, passionate service lifestyle.
Tell me your feelings, because we're talking to a lot of people who want to help people. Now, it may not be with clean water. It may be in, 1,000 other ways as well. And I want to hit them all. As you look at this, we've got so much in today's day and age about working at your passions, pursue your passions. And I think it was Lynn Twist who may have been one of the first people who she said she really feels like, for her standpoint, it's more what she's pursuing comes from what breaks her heart. And it meant a lot to me because I've often thought, I don't know if I'm passionate about it or if it burdens me. It grieves me.
I heard a pastor once talk about a holy discontent, that you can see a lot of things, but what's not okay on your watch?
Yeah.
Right. There are myriad problems in the world. I mean, I could have just as soon probably been taken by hunger or shelter or justice issues or healthcare issues. For me, what wasn't okay was that a guy like me in nightclubs could sell bottles of water for $10 to people who wouldn't even open the water because they were drinking champagne instead. And 10% of the planet, or at that point, 1 in 6 people on the planet, didn't have access to the most basic need for human life every day. And we actually knew how to solve it. Yeah. So this was a completely solvable problem that nobody was solving at scale. That people weren't talking about. There wasn't even a basic level of awareness. So, I mean, I think that's just where I started. Maybe you talk about motive. I mean, I think I wanted to be a very successful nightclub promoter. I wanted to be rich and I wanted to be famous and, the king of New York City. I think some of that ambition certainly very quickly translated over to charity water. I wanted to build an organization, that wouldn't just help a few people, but would actually bring clean water to every single person on earth. So if you'd met me 18 years ago on day one of charity water and said, hey, are you the guy that got back from Africa? Like, I heard you were on some ship. What are you up to now? I would have told you, I'm going to bring clean water to every single person on this planet before I die, or die trying. That is the mission. So it wasn't help a few people. It was actually solve a problem in its in its totality for the human race or for the planet. And then you start, right? It started with one well in Uganda, that's now turned into 171,000 across 29 countries. But, you have to start somewhere. But that vision has always really animated me. Today we're at about $997 million the charity water is now raised. So we'll hit $1 billion, in the next few weeks or so. And, that's a lot of money to a lot of people. It's a fraction of what I thought we would have mobilized. It is an order of magnitude smaller than I saw the world, than I saw the impact of the organization I was starting. And I think and hope we're in the bottom of the first inning of the game, or maybe the top of the second inning. And the greatest impact is yet to come. Yeah. Because the vision is so big. Because you can't be happy with raising $1 billion and helping 20 million people if your goal is to help everybody. Yeah. Because there's 700 million people. So great, we've done 1/36th of the current, we've solved 1/36th of the current problem, 2.5%. So there's another 97.5% still out there.
I mean, your story, Scott, is incredibly, obviously compelling for water. And, we'll be promoting that with the show here. It'll be in the intro. Go here and, give to charity water and see how you can help. I do want to, again, come back, though, and hit from a big standpoint on just the concept of purpose and how it's even bigger. I want to hear from you how it's even bigger than the point. Like you just said it, you could have gone towards, food or violence or human trafficking. And there's a lot of needs out there. And if we're debating, okay, which one's going to help most? But just hit that. Somebody who's out there going, okay, yeah, I want to devote myself to something. And the propensity to start debating which one's more important. Would you say, well, let's first back up and see which matters to you. But I'm also assuming it's bigger than just water, for instance. So you're helping people with water so that what? So they can live. So that what? So they can.
Well, yeah. I mean, gosh, if I make the case for water, again, most people don't think about this. And I bet, very few people listening woke up this morning just, bowling themselves over with gratitude about how much clean water they have been able to just enjoy for the entirety of their human life because of the circumstances they were born into. I had a friend recently, lives in a small 3-bedroom house, and he counted his taps. And he went home, after a trip to Africa, and he wanted to see how many places clean water came out of a tap in his 3-bedroom, call it 1,500 square foot home. I think it was 16.
Wow.
16 taps.
Wow.
Right. So most people don't wake up and just think about that. Water impacts health dramatically. I mentioned in Liberia, half the disease in the country was waterborne. There are 28 diseases you can directly track back to unsafe water. And that is true today. In many of these countries, you could empty 50% of the hospital beds and fold them up if people just had clean water to drink every single day. So health is kind of one huge issue. Education, this is something most people don't think about. But when I started Charity Water, 1 in 3 schools in the world, check this out, not only didn't have clean water, also didn't have toilets. So imagine sending your teenage daughter to a school with no water and no toilet. And this turned out to be one of the top reasons why girls don't finish school. They get their period, they stay home 4 or 5 days a month, they fall behind in their studies. It's already culturally their role to go and get the water. So if their village doesn't have it close, well, then they start walking 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the burden on Education was profound. The burden on women was profound. I remember coming across this stat that 40 billion hours were wasted just in Africa by women walking for dirty water every year.
Wow.
So you imagine just the senselessness. I mean, imagine 49 hours a week would be occupied with getting dirty water. It's you talk about work-life balance, right? And then, the local economy, so much money is spent on medicine for disease. I remember being really shocked once when someone told me, well, when our kids get sick with the dirty water that they have to drink, it's actually not the medicine that's the biggest problem. It's the taxi to the clinic, which could be 1 month's wages just to get a sick child. So some of the medicine's actually subsidized if you can get them there. But a lot of the kids die in the village because they don't have the taxi fare to get to the health clinic. So water's like this onion, you just start to kind of unpeel it and you realize there are so many layers. It is one of the most multifaceted issues or substances on human life. It is the most basic need for human life, right? You can go you were talking about fasting. You can go a very long time without food.
Yeah.
You cannot go very long without water.
Yeah.
You'll dehydrate and die.
You mentioned the economy in those places, and I wanted you to do that, to kind of go further than the water, that you provide water. So you come into an area and you help them with water. What are you mentioned the economy, but the ripple effects. I mean, ultimately, you're looking at a human being and going, so they're not dying from water so that they can, what's the joy?
So really it's the women and the girls that are benefiting because they were the ones getting the water previously. The men at best are working with the livestock, or they're working in agriculture, or they're maybe at a factory, trying to earn money. And it's the women that are walking for the water. So we hear incredible stories of entrepreneurship. We hear women that will use that reclaimed time. And again, I can't stress enough how dramatic it would be if your wife spent 49 hours, 7 days a week, walking for water, and then one day that went to 0.
Yeah.
Because there was water right next to your home.
Yeah.
What might she do with 49 hours a week?
Oh my gosh.
She probably take better care of your kids.
Yeah.
And a lot of women say, we just get to spend more time with our families. We get to mentor our children. We get to lead them forward. And then we hear stories of baking businesses, brick building businesses, women selling things at the market, then using that income, the income generated with that freed up time, to put their kids in school, to pay school fees, to buy school uniforms, to improve their homes, going from a mud roof to a tin roof that keeps out the rain. There was a 88-page paper that came out of the UN a couple of years ago that actually started tracking this, and they found every dollar that you invested in water and sanitation, so water and toilets, returned 4 to 8x in economic benefit. And they found in some really rural communities a 20x return, where you could track a 20x economic benefit just by starting with the most basic need for human life. No. And again, I think everybody that's listening is like, well, that makes sense, but you don't think about it. You just think of water as this thing that we all have, and maybe there's a little too much fluoride in it, or maybe it tastes a little funny, so we're going to filter, or we're going to buy it in bottles, or we're going to take it to the gym or the yoga studio in a designer bottle, or in a Stanley bottle, or a Bejeweled bottle. You just don't really think of water impacting your life in a way that you do if you don't have it, if you don't have access to that clean water, or if it's far away.
And Scott, I want to hit again on kind of your journey into, it's called charity water. So let's talk about charity, in that we look at this effort towards altruism. I'm going to go feed the homeless. I'm going to go help, with water, or with, what's the big one out here? Compassion International, go help feed a kid and take care of a kid and whatnot. And I sometimes wonder, we look at them, the benefit to them. Talk about the benefit to the giver, the person who's helping.
I think generosity transforms people's hearts and minds and lives. It's kind of simple. You're either waking up every day saying, what can I do for myself? And typically that's, some version of money, cars, houses, vacations, status, right? How can I pleasure myself? Or how can I be useful to others? They're just very different. How can I use what I've been given to bless somebody else? It could be tipping a waiter or waitress extravagantly. It could be going and volunteering. It could be giving money to a local charity. I think it's really about the intention of your life. And when you are turning towards service, and again, this does not need to be a Mother Teresa kind of all in, austere life of, forgoing everything. But when you're just kind of asking that question more often, you're free. You're free of the trappings of just concentrating on yourself and your own needs. It's interesting you brought up the word charity, so I guess I'll riff on that for a second. The mission of Charity Water is to bring clean water to every single person on earth. The vision, really kind of, I would argue, even the bigger thing that we're doing is kind of this movement of charity. We're trying to reinvent or reimagine the whole charitable experience. And the word is a beautiful love. Charity means love. And it means, it's caritas in the Latin. If you look at various definitions, it's to help your neighbor in need and not get anything in return. So it's really thinking about others and not yourself. It's a virtue. So when I started, I realized so many people were really skeptical about charity or institutional charity or giving money to a charity. They didn't know where their money went. They didn't know whether the money would actually be used properly. Would the charity be a good steward of it? Turned out there was data to show just how much people distrusted charities and how little they believed the charity would be a good steward of those donations. One crazy study came out at NYU, found 70% of Americans believe charities waste their money. Like 7 out of 10 givers believe charities waste their money in some part. And so what we've really been trying to do in the way that we structured Charity Water, the kind of values at the core of it, are really inviting some of those cynical, skeptical people who might have thrown up their hands and rejected the idea. Maybe they had a bad experience. Maybe they were burned. And invite them back to this, table of giving and generosity and care for others through a new model and a new construct. Again, hoping that it does transform their lives in the process and transforms the lives of other people who need clean water and are benefiting from those acts of generosity. So there's actually a lot going on. I try to write about this in the book and some of the, maybe the first principles behind this. But, there was, I remember just thinking when we started, where's the Apple of charities? Who's the inspired charity that is using great design and creativity and imagination to build an inspired movement of givers, not a movement of givers who feel guilty or shameful, but are really, calling people to be the greatest version of themselves and bringing the best of what they have to a noble cause. And again, I'd argue, I think we're lucky. I mean, everybody thinks clean water is a good idea. Republicans and Democrats can actually agree on clean water for humans. Faith communities and atheists can both nod their head and say, well, people need water. People need water to thrive. So we've really got this universal good that has allowed us to really, build a community now of millions of people who may differ greatly on the social issues of the day or the political issues of the day, but can stand for compassion and generosity and clean water for humans.
Scott, it reminds me, we had Bill Weir on the show recently. So he's, CNN's chief climate correspondent, goes around the world and he's looking at climate and the issues around that. I had him on the show, not to talk about climate necessarily, but I loved his perspective. Not that I care, but it was his perspective of changing the climate is not going to come from, this law or this specific tactic or whatever. It's going to come from changing the cultural story about how we view the climate and our place on it and our responsibility with it. You remind me as you talk about that with charity, that you're looking at how can we change that. And if we've got a cynical world out here that's going, it doesn't really matter. That's a bad story. It's not helping. So is that Does that fall in line with you? Looking to change the story on charity?
I think so. Change the story. And again, I'm not a person who's out there calling other charities out, and most of them are absolutely well-intentioned, sure. and so many of them are well-run and are great stewards. It's really kind of call people out saying, you're not going to be able to make those excuses with us, at least the typical excuses. So come try it out again. I'll never forget on our opening night of Charity Water. It's funny, again, not even realizing this at the time, but it was a little bit of a redemptive turn, because the first night of Charity Water, the only idea I had was to get a nightclub donated, email everyone I knew from the 10 years in nightlife, and invite them to my 31st birthday party. And the twist here was they had to donate $20 to get inside the nightclub. So at the end of the night, we collected $15,000, which we had done before, but instead of putting $15,000 in our own pockets, we took 100% of that money and we built the very first well of Charity Water in Uganda. And, what was so cool was we then went back to those 700 people. We took photos of the well that they built. We took video. We sent them Google Earth satellite images and said, here's exactly where your money went. Here are the people who you directly helped through such a small donation. And that idea of closing the loop, kind of the feedback loop, turned out to be wild. I mean, it sounds so intuitive in a way, like, hey, charities should take people's money and then tell them where the money went. But that was so unique and distinctive at the time that we said, wow, who knew that this was such a competitive advantage? But it really is. Let's build this into the DNA of everything the organization does. This idea of proof, this idea of hyper transparency and hyper accountability. And maybe we can get millions and millions of people to give charity another look, or even to ask more and to demand more when it comes to the accountability of their donations.
Well, it's interesting to me, Scott, because I grew up, let's go to my adult life, and initially in church. So I'm going to church, and I was of the cloth of you tithe 10%, period.
Yep.
And we did that for so many years that if for my CPA, you want to figure out how much money I made this year? Well, just look at the statement from the church, because I gave exactly 10%. And it was just another bill to write. I just wrote it out and realized in one time that I have no thought towards this. It has no meaning to my life at all. It's just kind of, I'm racking up points in heaven. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what they do with it. They pay the pastor, the staff. What are they doing? I'm so disconnected. So to that, it makes sense to me to respond back and go, look, this is literally what to connect you with. This is what your money's doing.
Yeah. And I think, look, there are less people blindly tithing now, I think. So, this is even good for churches to say to people, here's all the awesome stuff you're funding. Here's what you're, if you have us on autopilot at 10%, here is the redemptive community work you're making possible. Here are some of the people who, could be out there in the professional world and they're taking a third of their salary to work for this church. You're making their work possible as they come and they serve this local church community, as they serve our community writ large, as they serve the global community through the missions of the church. So, I think these very simple principles that have helped Charity Water now, mobilize millions of people around the world could also work in the church, but it's a little foreign. The church is often very allergic to transparency.
Well, let me pull this out and see how you resonate. This is a long time. 5-6 years ago or so, I was hired by a handful of guys that I knew. They were on the board of a nonprofit, of a charity. And they shared with me, they hired me to help with the branding and some stuff. But they said, you know what? We're so tired of the people involved with the charity coming to us and saying, we need money because these are the problems. We got these issues. We got to fix them. They said, we just get tired of hearing the problems. Tell me the positive. Tell me what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you're building. Tell us we want to see things growing, even if it's just twisting your semantics on how you share this, but we don't want to hear the negatives and to try to bail you out. We want to help create something. Do you find that as well?
Yeah. Somebody asked me once, what is the delta between your vision and where you're currently operating? And I'm like, well, about $125 billion.
Yeah.
Right. But I think I actually had the answer for that. And I think a lot of people don't really. And that's what people are inspired by. what are you? So my buddy started Spotify. He's been very generous to Charity Water, and many, many years ago, he came to Ethiopia with me, and we're in the back of a Land Rover, and he's telling me the story of his kind of ambition around music for all, really. And he had 900,000 Spotify subscribers at the time who were paying, $8 or $9 a month. And he stands up in front of the company and he says, we're going to 100 million paid subscribers, and we're going to do it in 10 years or less. And it took him 11.
Wow.
But I think they're at 280 million now, going to 1 billion. Yeah. So sometimes, he could have told you exactly what is the delta. The delta is 99.3 million people, which is the delta to this next milestone. Now the delta for him is 700 million people around the world. And as he thinks about people in Africa and India and Southeast Asia, can't afford $10 a month, but could afford $2 a month. So I think that is often, and it's so easy because it's hard raising money. I mean, it really grates on you after a while. I mean, I kind of joke that there's not been a day in the last 18 years where I am not asking somebody for money. If I'm on vacation, I'm asking them for money in my own mind to move the mission forward, because the money directly turns into human transformation. We're out there building 14 different types of water projects across 29 countries. If the money stops, all that work stops. More than 5,000 people sit on their hands. There's no money to go put gas in the drilling rigs. There's no money to buy PVC pipes or parts for the wells. So I think you have to lead with inspiration and vision, and not, it's been a really tough fundraising year. Please help us save Jill's job in accounting. So we're going to have to lay Jill off.
Exactly.
People don't invest in stocks like that. You don't invest in the companies that are shrinking, either in their ambition or their vision, or their, you want to invest in NVIDIA. You want to invest in Apple. You want to invest in companies that are growing, that have a growth mindset, that feel like they have achieved a fraction of what is possible through their product or their service, or their organization. So I think we're always really, really way out ahead, deeply dissatisfied with whatever we're doing at the current moment, which can also certainly be exhausting and can lead to burnout. But I think on balance, it really helps inspire people to be part of something that is winning and that's out there, wanting to do more, because the do more is, inarguably noble. The do more just means more humans get clean water to drink. It's hard to argue. I mean, no one has pulled me off of I've probably made 1,000 speeches over the last, years since I started Charity Water. No one has come up to me, after I walk off stage and said, Scott, I think you're wasting your time. Let them drink bad water. Let the children die from the swamp water. Let the women get raped as they walk 7 hours to the river far away from their house. Like, no one said that. Honestly, no one has ever said, I think you need to slow down. You should help less people. You really should be raising less money. So I think that it's pretty clean, for us. And and not everybody, maybe has a problem that they're working on that's that big. But for us, I think it's driven a lot of the growth.
Let me go to what you just said. Everybody, and everybody's opportunity to go back to charity. So in looking at our Christian upbringing and some of the scriptures, I always struggled with the concept of selflessness. Because I had a hard time seeing how I did anything that was that selfless. Even as we went to, children's homes on the Native American reservation and did some things as a family. And I thought, my ego's still here. I still exist. And give me your perspective. You talked to it a minute ago, but I am grateful for a guy, Anthony DeMello. Okay. No longer living. He was a Jesuit priest, but has some incredible books out that I pay attention to. Here's what he says, and I want your take on it.
What's one book that everybody should read from Anthony DeMello?
Awareness.
Awareness
is his big one. I actually found that one from Tim Ferriss.
Okay.
Awareness.
I'm going to write it down.
Yeah. He's more one of the blunt people from a faith-based standpoint of looking at our own humanity. And he talked on selflessness, and he actually uses the word charity, Scott. So this is in the book Awareness.
Okay.
He said, charity is really self-interest. Now, bear with me.
That's okay.
He reconciles it. He says it's really self-interest masquerading under the form of altruism. There are two types of selfishness. One, where I give myself pleasure, kind of what you talked about a minute ago, where I give myself the pleasure of pleasing myself. And he calls it self-centeredness. Number two, though, type of selfishness, when I give myself the pleasure of pleasing others. And he said he finds this a more refined kind of selfishness. And he says the second is not charity so much, but enlightened self-interest. And of course, he said, I would advocate for number two. I appreciated that because I've always struggled with that selflessness. You do it and you get nothing out of it. I don't know if I'm capable. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, every once in a while, someone will come up and they've got this martyr mentality in their head. And, you're so good on you. I'm like, I don't know. I love what I get to do. I get to take my kids to Africa, and I've been to 72 countries. I've been to Africa 55 times now. Like, I have an amazing life. I'm jumping on a flight to London in a couple hours. It's my 51st flight of the year. I get to meet interesting people and go interesting places. And so I don't think there's ever been this sense of, I don't talk about selflessness. That's not even part of the vocabulary. I'm not calling people to selflessness. I think I am calling it the generosity. Generosity resonates a lot more with me. How can we share more of what we have? How could more of what we have benefit others? And that could be time. That could be money. It could be mentorship. So, and then I think about sacrifice a little more. I think true radical generosity, it has to hurt a little bit. It's giving maybe where it does inconvenience you a little bit. And it might be inconveniencing you because you feel like you lost some security.
Yeah.
I was in Oklahoma last week with a guy, and he's like, and I felt like he almost described my dad with bigger numbers. He's like, my dad, guy lives on like $20,000 a year, probably has $4 or $5 million in the bank, and just doesn't think it's enough. So generosity might be giving 4 of the 5 million away and then losing security, right? You would be sacrificing security because if everything goes wrong, that's kind of that crutch you fall back on. But I'm much more compelled by that language. I think it's more useful in the world. A call to generosity, a call to just, I think my buddy Simon Sinek many years ago, I think he said to me, like in an elevator bank, he's like, the more you give, the more you give, right? It's less about this whole, it's almost like a muscle that you work out. The more you work out at the gym, the more you want to work out at the gym. The more you run, the more you want to run. This works on so many different kind of health parameters. And it's fun. I was with a guy recently who tips $100. He's a wealthy, entrepreneur, and he tips $100 every single time he goes out to breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And he just loves it. On the margin, I mean, what is he? Let's say he eats out 200 times a year. It's not real money to him. There's people listening that probably have spent that on a watch or on a vacation, but he gets to kind of spread that feel good surprise moment to somebody who just charged him $18 for a couple eggs and gets $100. And that makes him feel great. I don't think that's selfless. Right. But it is generous. And it's not even generosity necessarily with sacrifice in this case, but it's certainly, if the 250 people on the receiving end of that generosity, we jumped back in the car and I said, look, $100 doesn't even go that far. And I walk into the supermarket now to food shop for my family. It's like $325, right? To buy all the stuff and the organic eggs and the milk. But I think what he's really doing is the lift it would give the person. Yeah. More than what they can go buy at the supermarket with $100 or the buying power of $100. It's a high. Yeah. What a cool thing. You come home and say, oh my gosh, this guy left me $100 tip on $18 and a little note and said, appreciate your service. So it doesn't have to happen in the most, penultimate terms,
grandiose way. We'll hit that too. So let's go. This is my dad was a career coach, a lifetime career coach, and he said, so often he'd find somebody who had a faith experience, came to Christ, had a religious experience, and they said, okay, I want to go serve the Lord. And they figure, all right, I got to go into ministry, right? I got to be a pastor. I got to go into the fivefold ministry. I got to be full time. And how often that was not a fit for them, and how we could let's look at some other ways to support the same cause. Hit on that as well.
I love Gary Vaynerchuk. For those that know him, is constantly trying to talk people out of being entrepreneurs. He said most people do not have the skill set to start something and sustain it. It's a really dark, lonely place. Go work somewhere. Go use your talents and join a really great cause and a values aligned culture. But so I have seen that so many times where someone will try to
in regards to charity, because somebody could hear this and go, I want to help. I'm going to give everything up and go over and serve over in Africa or whatever, work for Charity Water. Well, Charity Water is supported by a lot of these folks over here who are entrepreneurs or executives who are making cash to be generous.
Exactly. I mean, this may be slightly controversial, but it reminds me of something my wife said early on. So she was the creative director for the first 10 years at Charity Water. And, we were known early on for our really great design. And we just, our website looked better than everybody else's. Our, product flows were just, they were great. So we would have lots and lots of designers apply. And I remember, the applications, a lot of them would come in and say, I love Charity Water and the mission so much. I will do anything. I will clean toilets at Charity Water. And it was this kind of like, bleeding heart for the mission. She would throw all those applications away so fast. Wow. What she wanted to see was passion for mastery of the craft. She wanted to see someone saying, I would like to be the most skilled graphic designer in America. And hey, really cool. I just found out I could actually do that at a nonprofit that values that mastery, that values that craft, and that my excellence in work would actually benefit others, maybe instead of a big four tech company. So I think, that I think keeps me going too, because you're never good enough. There's always something to learn. There's always a way to improve, to do better quality work. And, I just am lucky that the work at the end of the day means, today I think 5,000 new people will get clean water for the very first time because of the collective work of me and 120 people here in America and over 5,000 people, working on these actual projects around the world. The better we get at our jobs, the more people benefit. Yeah. But again, I don't put this in selflessness or any sort of martyr talk. This is what we get to do. It's just cool. I could also be selling phones or making some sort of widget, and then wanting to do that with the highest quality and the highest integrity possible, both in the way that I ran that company and the end goal of the product, that it would be a 5-star review, that it wouldn't break, that it would do exactly what it said it did and meet the needs that we were advertising. There would be truth in the marketing and the actual product experience.
Hit on, again, on this aspect of charity as people are looking at where do I be generous? Growing up again in church and missions trips and whatnot, I got to where I questioned the value. And I thought, this group of people and all the effort of these kids going over and doing a mission trip somewhere, did they really make a dent? I felt like it was more for them. They got a really cool field trip that expanded their life.
I think no, often. I think the drive-by, I joke sometimes that the orphanage got painted 6 times that year, all different colors, and probably goes back to the original color on the 6th time.
Yeah.
I don't know that. Well, I think it did transform some of their lives. It transformed my life. I needed to be in proximity. I needed to live in the poorest country in the world and see the needs and internalize the needs. And, you said have your heart broken. I was probably a little less emotional than that, but, certainly be energized by the fact that these needs could be met with resources. And that a person or family or organization could stand in the gap and matchmake and find people with resources and get those resources in a highly credible, efficient way to people who lacked those resources. Again, in this case, water, right? So like the most basic resource needed to sustain human life. So that was kind of just an aha for me. Well, I could contribute here. I don't know that I would have had that experience. If I went for a 1 week, I would not have come back probably with a life's mission to bring clean water. You know, Brian Stevenson, there was a book, Just Mercy, and a movie written about his life, you know, talks a lot just about the power of proximity. You know, the more time you spend, and this could be local, you know, if somebody's really passionate about a battered women's shelter locally, I don't know that a 1 hour tour would have the impact on their life. But I bet if they volunteered there for a couple weeks or really got to know the staff, got to know the women, you know, it would start to become much more meaningful for them. And they would have much greater connection to that work and also a greater authority to know about the nuances and the complexities and become an ambassador for that. So I think, look, I encourage people, go give in your local community. You know, we give to our local church. We give to local organizations working here in the Nashville area. We also give to a bunch of organizations internationally, and we get to live vicariously through the great work of these organizations, all doing very different things to improve the lives of people, improve the lives of communities.
Oh, I do want to just hit again on purpose, Scott, and your own story, that you to look back on your trajectory, what has been the value as you look at, like, thank God I found this thing, because what it did for you to find something that you are, again, breaks your heart, you're passionate about, you have a discontent about, and being able to wake up every morning knowing you're doing something that matters. And I'm asking that, my context here is, you know, that we've got so many people who are so disconnected with any value that they're providing or contributing in their work. It's just for a paycheck. And we see the results of that. Going back to Lynn Twist, you know, living a committed life, what the value has been to you, to your family, to your friends, to the people's lives at large.
Again, you know, personal experience is much easier than to, you know, try and preach some sort of methodology to others. Yeah. But I was very fortunate that I played out the hedonism. And there was no mystery left there. So when, you know, I was offered a C-level job pre-IPO at what became a, you know, $1 trillion company, right? So I probably would have made well over $100 million if I took it. There was zero part of me that considered taking that job or working for that $1 trillion company because I knew what I wanted to do. Yeah. And, you know, nor is there any regret. And also I've been around so many rich people who were deeply unhappy. So I knew that extraordinary wealth did not bring flourishment. It didn't bring you a great marriage. It didn't bring you a great relationship with your kids. And in fact, often that's a dissonance, right? It's harder to do those things when you have ultimate optionality. So I had played out the vices. I'd played out the pursuit of money, the pursuit of status. I knew what it felt to date models who were on the cover of fashion magazines and have everybody else be jealous for you in that moment. And these things were all really kind of meaningless and emptiness. And then I was given an opportunity to work really hard, and you know, with a bunch of doctors. And really, I was just telling their stories, but the stories moved people to action. And then the action was more people getting help by more doctors. And just realized that, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the skill that I have, I'm just a promoter. I mean, that's the thing that I promote. I'm promoting clean water. You know, I'm promoting the idea of generosity or compassion. I was promoting the idea for 10 years that if you got past the velvet rope and you got into the right nightclub at the right time with the right people and you were seen there, then your life had meaning. Well, that did not give lives meaning.
Yeah.
And I do believe that in encouraging people to ask how they can be helpful, how they can use the resources they have been blessed with to improve the lives of others, and then build a global organization really with the goal of getting everybody clean water. It's been very natural for me. It doesn't feel forced, and it doesn't feel like I'm making a sacrifice.
You a minute ago, you mentioned you don't want to hear somebody who says, "Oh, I love charity water. I just want to, I'll do whatever, take out the trash." You want to hear, "Hey, I have a skill. Graphic design is what you use."
That's in workers. I mean, we want people to love the mission and give generously.
True,
of course.
True. But have that. Well, but I'm bringing that now to you saying, "Okay, what's your role?" I'm a promoter. Fair enough. You could have done that out here and please yourself. And you brought it over, as Anthony DeMello said, and you are using it to please others. Man, I've been looking forward to this, Scott, and talking about these issues. I hope my intent with the show is that it helps open people's eyes to how they can serve well, one, charity, and how it benefits them in finding that purpose. Again, and I saw in you what I experienced with Lynn Twist, and saw, man, that purpose. It's such an inspiration to whether it's charity water or whether it's some other, opportunity, or it's selling widgets that you love and you believe in, but you find purpose in and find an ability to contribute. And I will probably title the show somewhere around generosity. That's what you kept coming back to. And the value that it is to my life to be generous and to help another. So I'm grateful for what you've done. Again, I've been following it for years and was eager to connect with you. Thank you. Awesome. And I hope we can drive a lot of people your direction.
Yeah. And if there's, if people want to see some of the images or the video, the place to go is thespring.com. We made this kind of short film that's gotten over 130 million views now. And I think it's a great way to kind of introduce this idea of, hey, humans don't have water to your kids. Families watch this thing together. And it's really helped kind of power, this next, hopefully, leg up of impact of charity water, because the organization is really about getting everybody involved. I am so much more excited than 1 million people giving $1 than one person giving $1 million. We really are about that engagement, because we know that engagement just enriches people's lives and enriches the lives of the giver, and then it enriches the lives of the person, that's getting clean water. So if people want to just learn a little more, just go to thespring.com. You can obviously go to charitywater.org, but that film we're really proud of. And it's just a great way to kind of sit and see what it looks like. It's one thing for me to talk about a kid drinking from a swamp. Yeah. It's unbelievable that this problem still exists in our world. I mean, Elon Musk is looking for water on a planet 142 million miles away, right? And, as we go up into space and we look down at our beautiful blue planet, we have to solve this problem. It's crazy that 700 million people, just still suffer every day needlessly because we have not created the resources and mobilized the global will to say, not on our collective watch. Right? Not on our watch are people going to wake up and drink dirty water when we know how to solve this problem. So I'm really hopeful about the future and the future of just the movement of everyday people, resisting the apathy that's so easy to accept with any of these paralyzing global issues, and just say, I could do something. I could sponsor one water project, or I could give, $30 a month. I could give what I'm giving to Netflix to help people get access to clean water. And that's where I think the future of the organization is really going.
But man, thanks for the story, because I hope it's helped enrich my life, Scott, today, and given me a different story. I'll go watch it and I'll show it to my family as well. It is what you just said there. It's daunting. Again, I think it was Bill Weir who recently said that in regards to climate. You can showcase all this stuff and the tragedy that's happening. And then, all right, man, I got to meet with my CPA and I got a lunch appointment, and you go on to the next urgent thing. So thanks for bringing the gravity.
Thanks for the conversation.
Oh, hey, it was a gift. Again, I've been curious. I wanted to ask these questions. I will take it to my family first, and then take it to the audience here. And thanks for all you do, Scott. And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. God bless you.
Well, friends, thanks for joining me on this journey. Again, that's Scott Harrison with Charity Water. You can find them anywhere you search for them, it'll come up. His book that you can, again, get in depth and hear more of his incredible story is called Thirst, a story of redemption, compassion, and a mission to bring clean water to the world. If you've got a question for me, for Scott, let me know. shoot me a note at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. I just saw a long email come in from a listener, and I'm eager to hear what they had to say and engage with them. I'd be honored to engage with you as well. I hope this episode helps you drive further, and most of all, enjoy the ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.